What season do you think it is based on this man's clothes? The answer is all seasons. He would have to dress like this winter and summer. He works near the heat of a furnace and it is so hot if he didn't have protective clothing on it would burn his skin. Could you imagine working in these clothes in 90-degree weather? Here at the Youngstown Historical Center of Industry and Labor, we try to focus on the rapidly disappearing culture of the steelworker, what his life and work were like. Before safety regulations began in the 1950s, there were large vats of molten steel all throughout the mills and no railings. If a mill worker fell into one of these vats, he was vaporized instantly. So his family could have some form of closure, the managers would mail home a 140-pound slab of steel, which was the average weight of a man at the time, and that is what his family would bury. Iron is one of the first things the early settlers began to manufacture. This is a stone-stacked furnace and it was used to make iron. This model is actually 3 times smaller than an actual furnace. It worked by taking the 3 main ingredients, charcoal, limestone, and iron ore, and loading them into the top of the stone stack furnace where it is cooked until it turns into liquid iron. This process takes about 24 hours. The molten iron, once cooled, broke from the mold and was cast into ingots called pigs. The men who originally worked these furnaces used to be farmers, and they thought that the ingots looked like piglets sucking from a mother sow, so they called it pig iron. Pig iron was not very durable or strong. It has about the tensile strength of your femur, so it was made into something called wrought iron by heating it and hammering it. Wrought iron was a bit stronger than pig iron, but as trains became bigger and faster, we needed something even stronger than wrought iron. We needed steel. The rise of steel came from the Bessemer process used in England. We adopted the Bessemer process and could make our own steel. Here are some tools that were actually made and used in the steel mills. Why are the handles so long on these tools? So the workers would not burn themselves while working over a fire. The Steelers logo represents the 3 colors of the 3 ingredients of steel: iron ore, coal, and limestone. For Steelers fans, Steelers used this logo for their team as a way for their fans to identify with them because they were steelworkers. And for the non-Steelers fans, you could say that Steelers stole the logo. This is a company house example. 2 rooms upstairs and 2 rooms downstairs, with a small basement with a bathroom inside. They had running water and all the modern amenities, though the houses were very small. The houses were kept very small because New European immigrants had a tendency to take in boarders in order to ease the expense of rent, and the company owners wanted to discourage this. This house is almost to scale, about a foot missing on each side, and the worker housing would have had poured concrete floors. These homes were in walking distance to the mills, so workers would wake up, work all day, come home, eat, and go to sleep. The only way a family could live here was if someone in the family worked in the mills. If the man of the house was fired, injured, or died on the job, the family had to move. White native-born workers could buy the houses, white immigrants could rent or own, but African Americans could only rent. Once a worker got to the mill, they would clock in and go to the locker room. We have lockers here that are representative of what workers would have throughout the various decades, starting in 1920. Prior to 1920, workers had these hanging baskets. They would pull down their basket operated by chains and pulleys. Why were these baskets hanging so high? Possibly to keep clothes off the floor, to keep them dry, and to keep thieves away. There's also one other reason. Steel mills were notorious for having rats the size of house cats. This is the health and safety equipment brought in by the unions after the Little Steel Strike of 1937. This large picture here is from the Youngstown City Ward Hospital in 1912. Most of the men have their feet up or wrapped, many of them are on crutches. The most common injuries in steel mills were naturally crushes and burns. These men worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. They would work 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Wake up, go to work, come home, eat dinner, and go to sleep. Every 2 weeks, they had to work a long turn, a 24-hour shift. Most of the injuries occurred during the second half of this 24-hour shift. After a long turn, the worker got 2 days off in a row. This is the control platform, and it weighs 10 tons. The men inside use levers and gears to control the movement of the steel ingot or bloom as it is being rolled out. This discoloration of the ingot is called scale, and it flies off. This mill is very loud. The water is used to cool off the machinery. The steel is so hot that it is in semi-liquidized state, allowing for its shape to be changed. The side bars squeeze the steel and the roller presses down and rolls the steel out. They are changing a steel ingot into the shape of a slab. The temperature is 2,500 to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Black Monday, September 19, 1977. This is the day when the Lykes Corporation announced that they were closing the Campbell Works of Youngstown Sheet and Tube. In quick succession, all of the other mills in Youngstown followed suit. The steel workers and everyone in the community were affected by this. Even if you did not work directly in the steel industry, your customers no longer had jobs to buy your goods, so other businesses like clothing stores, grocery stores, etc. took a hit as well. The reason for the decline is many. Plastics were hurting the steel industry, as it is lighter and cheaper and easier to make. Before plastic, everything was made of some form of metal. Secondly, Youngstown's location was a disadvantage, as it was not around any oceans, so we had to ship by rail. This was expensive, so we had to charge a higher price, losing business in the process. Steel in the mills were outdated. After World War II, the United States started the Marshall Plan in Europe. This sent money and new equipment over to the United Kingdom and Germany, as well as France and other countries. These countries took the money and new technologies and reinvested it in their companies. By the late 1970s, the European countries were outproducing us and treating their workers better. Coal was a main ingredient used to make iron in the stone stack furnace. Coal miners lived in coal camps, which were about 2 miles from the mines they worked in. They were not paid for how long they worked, but by how much coal they produced. Coal was measured by the cart, and miners were paid by cart. Mules and horses pulled the carts, but sometimes large dogs were used. The mines were very dangerous places to work because of the fear of cave-ins where men could get killed or trapped. Toxic gases could also kill the miners. They kept canaries in the mines to detect toxic gas. If the canary died, it could not be heard singing, and so they knew gas was around. Miners also fed rats because their little feet were closer to the ground and they could feel the vibrations of a cave-in before the miners could. If all the rats started running, all the men started running. The first kind of helmet was made out of cloth with a kerosene lamp on top of it. Because of the limited supply of kerosene, miners would wait until they went into the mine to light their lamps. Pipe used to be made by taking a piece of steel and welding it together to create a tube, but it was not structurally sound all the way around. Nowadays, they take a billet and punch a hole out through the middle so the whole tube is structurally sound. This method is still used at Vallourec Star, a local steel mill which mainly produces seamless pipe for the oil and gas industry. Andrew Carnegie, one of Pittsburgh's most well-known steel mill owners. He came to America from Scotland when he was just a boy and rose through the ranks to become one of the wealthiest men on the planet. Carnegie is generally not well remembered in history for various reasons. He and his manager, Henry Clay Frick, did not treat the workers at his steel mills very well, leading to the well-known Homestead Strike of 1892. Joseph Butler, he is Youngstown's well-known steel mill owners. He left an endowment to create the Butler Institute of American Art, the first free museum exclusively devoted to collecting American art in the world. It's still here in Youngstown, and a great visit. Here is the pattern shop. Back in the day, you could not just call down to the hardware store to get a replacement part if something on a steel mill broke, and it wasn't cost-effective to shut down the whole steel mill because something broke. All of these patterns here are pieces of a steel mill, but made out of mahogany and ebony, the hardest hardwoods. Workers would put the pattern into a big sandbox, remove the pattern, pour the steel in the impression, and when it cooled, there would be a new part. Parts in two-piece parts get welded together. The man up there has only one job, to make sure that no one gets hit by any flying scale. Have you ever eaten a peanut? When you crack open the peanut and part of the shell flies off, that is what the scale is like, except the scale is approximately 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. If it were to come into contact with your body, this would be what we would call a disabling injury. Which brings us to this picture here. This picture is of a coke mill celebrating approximately 60 days since the last disabling injury. Women were always present in the mills. They usually worked as telephone operators and office assistants. It was in World War I and especially World War II where we see women actually working on the shop floor. These women here are tin flippers. Tin is actually poisonous, which is why we make cans to hold our food out of it. Before it can be used as cans, it must be galvanized. These women are checking that one side is galvanized, then flipping it over to make sure the other side is galvanized properly as well. This photo is also staged. Men and women did not work together, but this was a propaganda photo taken to show how well men and women worked together.